Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. It's been a while since my last one, but I've been really busy lately. And to be honest, I'm not sure if I can put the videos out in a timely fashion or as quickly as I could before, since I have a lot of other stuff to handle first. Regardless, I'll try and put something out since I know a bunch of you watch the videos to decide how to build a character or get a preview of how they perform in different game modes. Obviously, for this video, I'm covering Black Bolt with his new uniform, as well as how he does at level 70, 80, and T4 in all game modes, including PvE and PvP. Gorr's AI rotation or skill priority also changed with this patch, and I'm not really going to be covering that in a separate video. All that you really need to know about it is that he prioritizes the 2 skill now after he uses his 4th skill, which is really good and basically has made the character top 3, I would say, or pretty much at the top of the timeline meta. The character is also a top option in things like Alliance Tournament and is a very strong addition to your roster for Alliance Conquest. I do have test footage of Gorr in Alliance Conquest, and I'll likely include that in an Alliance Conquest tier list update video whenever I get around to doing that, which will hopefully be before Black Friday so people can use it as a reference to decide what uniforms and characters to get. Going into the actual testing, on stage 9 of Knull, with no damage proc and without using his leadership or supports, I was able to complete the stage with about 2 minutes and 20 seconds remaining roughly. That's not too crazy, but it is still a good clear time nevertheless. From there, I took him into a stage 14, and again, without using his leadership or supports, I was able to clear the stage with 1 minute and 15 seconds left. Compared to some other characters that I've tested, that isn't too crazy, but he definitely is really solid. And you also have to take into account that I'm not using his leadership, which some other characters don't even have their own damage leadership. And besides that, some characters can get a huge blow up when they get to T4, which is kinda of Black Bolt's case, as you'll see in a little bit. If you want to build the character exclusively for PvE, then a CTP of Rage is by far the best option, because you can utilize him in multiple modes, including Giant Boss Raid and Alliance Battle Legend, as well as Alliance Battle Extreme. With a Rage, the character likely won't perform as well in things like World Boss Legend, compared to something like a Reforged CTP. However, I'm pretty sure that most people will take that trade since they want to complete Giant Boss Raid faster and possibly get more rewards in Alliance battle modes. With that said, the character can definitely function with a single skill damage proc. However, the timing on these skills can be a little bit tricky and you might end up missing some rotations, but it is still doable. In fact, most of the testing that I'm showing for the character is with a CTP of Destruction. In this particular clip, it's just a regular CTP of Destruction, so it's basically like I have only a 200 damage proc. Even with that, I was still able to clear stage 39 of Knull with barely no time left. Keep in mind for this test and the other ones, I am definitely using his leadership as well as 2 supports. To keep my results from the level 80 and T4 testing from getting messed up, I swapped him into a mighty CTP of Destruction, and also to show you the difference that a regular to a mighty makes when I cleared the same level 39 stage. As you can see, the clear time improved by about 2 minutes. To get a better idea of the improvement at level 80, I also took the character to a stage 65 of Knull, but unfortunately he didn't have enough damage to be able to clear that stage, since I was able to get the first phase done in a little bit over 2 minutes and 40 seconds, which isn't enough to clear the fight. For those wondering how the character stacks up in Giant Boss Raid, even at level 70 and with just a regular CTP of Destruction, before I swapped to that mighty, the character was able to clear the first phase in about a minute, which means that he could definitely complete the fight, and I would guess with somewhere about 4 minutes left. That's based off some of the other characters that I've tested that have cleared the first part in the same amount of time, and usually have ended up finishing with about 3.5 minutes left to 4 minutes left. Also, again, note that this is with a regular CTP of Destruction. With a CTP of Rage, he is much better in this mode, and is again the one that I would recommend for this and for things like Alliance Battle Extreme and Alliance Battle Legend. At level 80, the character finishes stage 39 about 1 minute and 50 seconds faster, but that 3 minutes and 40 seconds left usually is the indicator that he is much faster, but is limited by the boss's animations and cutscenes. At level 70, the character previously couldn't do stage 65, since I got down to almost that last 2 minutes left, which the game would have cut me off and said you don't have the amount of damage to do this stage. But at level 80, he can complete the stage, and he did so with well over 30 seconds left. With the character maintaining the Inhuman tag, people can now finally use him to clear the challenge for 3 Inhumans on stage 10.3 of this patch. Keep in mind that you don't actually need the latest uniform to be able to do this. All you need to do is get Black Bolt to, I believe, somewhere around level 77 or 78, since that's when you are matching or above the level of the enemies, meaning that you no longer have a disadvantage and actually have an advantage on them, allowing you to be able to easily clear the challenge. Additionally, I also heard and saw that the character is pretty good at auto-clearing, dispatch, and dimension rifts. However, I wasn't really able to test if he was as good or better than Thor, since I am using the destruction on him, and you would definitely need something like a CTP of Rage to be able to do that. At T4, the character got a pretty good 12,000 energy damage increase from me, and a decent 23,000 HP increase as well. I'm not entirely sure what the final damage means on his T4, but if you compare it to Hulk's, which is 200%, it seems to be one of the strongest damage amplifications in the game, even better than damage dealt. I've also seen people asking what the first part of the T4 does, that says it changes the striker's abilities and characteristics to T4 ones, and I actually deliberately tested this to find out. If you notice in this first clip, when I activated the T4 skill, my Reforged CTP proc activated, and Storm did about a fourth of a health bar of damage. In this second clip, I used the T4 skill again, but this time not only did the Reforged proc activate, but also the CTP proc itself. You'll also notice that Storm actually did 3/4 of a bar of damage this time, as opposed to that 1/4. Some people initially speculated that you get the buffs that the Striker skill has, but in reality it seems to be the other way around. Your procs and skill buffs and everything apply to the Striker. You can also see that the T4 skill activates your CTP proc, meaning that you do share that proc with the Striker, unlike the other T4 skills where when you use those, it doesn't actually activate your CTP procs, with the obvious exception of Blue Dragon that has a damage component to her T4. Because the Striker damage actually matters with this T4, you might be curious as to which character to use for the Striker, and the one that I found works the best is Thor, especially if you have him at T4, since it would also max out Black Bolt's own T4 skill too. Makari would also work well too, since she is the same instinct, and she also has a 100% damage increase to her own skill, similar to Thor's 65% increase. If you paid close attention to the health bars, Thor basically did 2 health bars of damage to a stage 69 Knull. Compared to the character at level 80, at T4, the character got a greater than 2-minute improvement, since the previous clear was on stage 65 and this was on stage 69. One thing to note is that the healing for this uniform didn't really improve that much from his previous uniform, so he can sometimes be a little bit flimsy in the higher stages, but because you can move with the 4th skill, once you get a little bit used to using that skill and some of the attack patterns of the other bosses, you shouldn't have too much problems. If you try to play him recklessly though and just try to tank things, you won't really have a great time because of the low healing, but fortunately he also has self debuff removal, so oftentimes you won't really get locked down like you will with some other characters. You can see his damage is definitely up there with this new uniform, since I was also able to do a stage 34 of Gorr easily. You can see that my health is pretty much at max in about 1 minute and 20 seconds. Most of your damage will come from the new and improved T3 skill, however you have to keep in mind that that doesn't have an iframe ignore portion to it, so you can't really use it like other T3 skills when the boss is not targetable by your other skills. Fortunately, his skills 1 through 5 do a solid amount of damage, including even the second skill. With that being said, the rotation that I used for the character is to do 5, delay cancel 3, cancel 4. And then after that's done, you do a 1, cancel 2. You can delay cancel the 5th when he hits the ground, but with a little bit of practice, you can see that you can delay cancel it just a fraction of a second faster right before he hits the ground and still get the full damage from it. To be safe on the proc for the T3 and not kind of proc earlier because the T3 is sticky, I do 2 rotations of this. And then when I have the T3 available to me, I do the same thing, but this time I activate the 4th skill first and immediately cancel that, and then do 5 delay cancel 3 into the 6th or ultimate skill, which is what I want to proc on. The reason that I cancel the 4th skill first is because it has a single skill damage proc on it, which can be transferred to the ultimate skill. When you have your T4 skill available, you basically do it right after the ultimate skill, or right after the 4th skill if you have it when your ultimate isn't up. Like I mentioned earlier, because the T4 skill activates your CTP proc, this is one reason why a CTP of Rage is more ideal, because you can use the T4 skill earlier and use your skills 1 through 5 to fill it up again. Besides that, when you're using a CTP of Rage, because the character doesn't have guaranteed crit, when activating the T4 skill, it basically adds another layer of hits, meaning that in a way it basically acts like guaranteed crit because there's so many hits activating that it makes it more consistent. You can see that a 3-minute clear time with a CTP of Destruction is actually pretty great, considering that with Rage it's even faster, and that I'm not using an artifact or any Odins, meaning that he can be stacked up much higher and complete this even faster. The character is definitely meta in alliance battle modes, because not only does he have paralysis and silence to cancel the bosses, but his T4 skill also allows him to equip basically any other striker to do the same things for the abilities that he's missing. With a less than optimal CTP for Alliance Battle, that being a mighty CTP of Destruction, I was still able to score close to 11 million in Alliance Battle Extreme and about 4.5 million in Alliance Battle Legend. Again, if you use a CTP of Rage, that becomes way higher, and I've seen people score above 8.5 million and even cap out with Black Bolt in Alliance Battle Legend, not only Alliance Battle Extreme. So with me talking about a CTP of Rage so much, you might be curious as to why I went with a CTP of Destruction, and the clear answer is because he does have some value in PvP. And by giving him a CTP of Destruction, I not only give him value in PvP, giving him penetration and guard break immunity, but I also get to get some value out of him in PvE content as well. The main benefit with his new uniform is that he gets that damage leadership and a self debuff removal, which also gives him iframe ignore. And I'm not really sure what the interaction is when you use other debuff removals and not his, whether he gets the iframe ignore or not. But to be on the safe side, I would probably just use his own leadership and not have any additional self-debuff removals on the team. You can see that with the Destruction, he definitely has the burst damage to take out some of the top metas. However, with that 25% damage mitigation on his uniform and only 15% healing on his 5th skill, I don't really think that a survival-based build will add too much for him, and it's probably better just to double down on damage. Because of this, I would recommend a CTP of Destruction first and foremost, especially because he'll likely get debuffed right away and get that iframe ignore, which couples well with the penetration and the 200% damage proc. Alternatively, you could also go with a CTP of Greed if you choose the proper proc versus the opponent you're fighting, because he likely won't really survive too much to be able to get the other proc or get value from the ambush effect. Lastly, you could also use a CTP of Rage if you just want to get that burst damage. However, most of your value will be in PvE, and obviously the CTP of Destruction will be better because you will have guard break immunity and can potentially follow up with other skills. If you notice, for these last 3 clips, the character was at level 80, and there isn't really too much change in his performance just with that. At T4, the character becomes recognizably better. Because his base damage is higher, his one-shot potential is more consistent, often leaving his other skills available to him as opposed to using them all up to take out the opponent and then being left with just the 1st and 2nd skill. Because of this, you'll see that sometimes he'll just one-shot the next opponent on the team because he's using skills that not only do more damage, but also have higher skill priority than his lower skills like his 1 and 3. The AI's rotation could be improved, but is decent nevertheless. He opens with his 5th skill, and then often goes into his 2nd skill, followed by his 4th skill, and then usually back to the 5th skill if he's not interrupted. If he is, he often goes to the 3rd skill first. Him opening with the 5th skill is pretty nice though, because it does have an iframe and a lot of lingering damage on it. So when you get debuffed, that lingering damage will start to go through iframes. Besides the poor survivability for the character, another issue is that you only get the iframe ignore for the set period of time, so you won't really survive long enough to get it more than once, and it'll likely only apply to either one skill or from the lingering damage of the 5th skill and one other skill that follows up after it. So for this reason, the character won't really be viable in things like Timeline, where you definitely need iframe ignore available to you all the time, and will be more situated for things like Alliance Conquest. You can see that because of this, he's only really able to take out one life of characters with revives and those that do have iframe ignore. And facing him versus Gorr is basically a death sentence because he also has the lockdown on his 2nd skill. Speaking of Alliance Conquest, I took him for a few tests there. The first one that I did was versus Defenders, just to get a baseline. And because he is universal and does energy damage, he doesn't have any penalties versus them and was able to take them out. Besides that, the only other team that I tested against was a Thanos, Colossus, and Hela team, and he is surprisingly pretty good versus that because Hela has no effect on him, considering that he is now a villain type. I did 2 of those fights to test his consistency, and he was able to win both of them, being able to survive long enough to take out Hela even after her artifact activated. However, you can see from the health bar that it probably won't be a consistent clear all the time, considering that he does need to take a little bit of damage for the debuff effect to activate and for the damage from the 5th skill to be able to get that iframe ignore ability, coupled with the penetration and the proc from the CTP of Destruction. This is why you don't see the opponents die right away, because they go into iframes and Black Bolt needs to get hit first, and then you see afterwards that they all get bursted down. So basically, if you want my opinion on whether to get the uniform or not, it really kind of depends on how competitive you are. If you're really into Alliance Battle and can't really wait till the next Universal Villain T4 comes around, then this pickup is probably essential for you. The character also has value in things like World Boss Legend and Giant Boss Raid for being able to clear quickly, and as I mentioned previously, there is evidence to show that the character does pretty well on auto clear modes like Dispatch and Dimension Rifts. He also has some value in PvP, specifically Alliance Conquest, so for all those reasons, he is a pretty decent pickup. However, if you are trying to save crystals for Black Friday, I wouldn't say that this uniform is absolutely essential. The only reason that I can see for this uniform to have even more value or sort of be a necessity is if an Inhuman tag is used as a restriction for a future mode or for another kind of rotation in something like Alliance Battle Extreme or Alliance Battle Legend. So if you do have the crystals and you're not too worried about saving them, then I would recommend the uniform, since it does give you a little bit of value everywhere, more so in PvE if you build him in that direction. That does it for this video. I've also tested Morgan Le Fay, and I'm not really sure when I can get that video out, but I'll try to do that within the next few days, and obviously before the next update comes around next week. As always, if you enjoyed the video, found it entertaining or useful, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already, and sharing it with your friends, since I'm primarily making the videos for you guys. I appreciate the people taking the time to watch these, so thank you, but the video is now over.